So what we're digging into today is really looking at the myths versus the facts and looking at really the data. Data doesn't lie, right? So Lightspeed recently released some data that reveals some really surprising truths that kind of challenge some of those common assumptions. And we have an amazing panel of experts who are going to dig into the facts, really, and the use of screen time for instruction. And also as part of that, how they're communicating that and educating their district communities, their parents, their school boards, et cetera. So we've got a lot of fun stuff to cover. But first, I just wanted to run through the platform quickly with you here so everyone knows, makes the most out of this experience. So clearly, folks have mastered the chat button here. So this is where we're going to say hello to everybody. So if you haven't said hello, please do tell us where you're from. And I see some folks I know, some new friends. You can use the emoji to wave. So this is, we're going to communicate with each other and our team. If you need anything, that chat is going to be kind of for audience participation. Everybody goes there. If you do have any kind of glitches or anything, which hopefully you will not, you can pop something in chat, but usually just a browser refresh will help you with that. Moving over to, I also do want to mention we have closed captioning available, so you can click that CC button to enable closed captioning, and we have it available in several different languages. But let's also look over to the Q&A. So the difference between the chat and the Q&A is really where you're going to put your questions for our speakers so we don't get lost in chat. And we are going to get to as many of the questions as we possibly can. I anticipate we're going to have quite a few today. But please put your questions in there for our speakers and we can get back to as many. If we don't get to your question, I promise we will get back to you after the webinar is over. Last, I wanted to just remind everybody to hang out until the end because we do have a $250 Amazon gift card to award and we'll be announcing the winner at the end of the webinar. So now, we are ready to get started, and I'm super excited to introduce our speakers today. We have Amy Bennett, who's the Chief of Staff, Lightspeed Systems. We have Charles Franklin, Assistant Superintendent in Cypress Fairbanks ISD in Texas, and Kyle Berger, who's the CTO at Grapevine-Colleyville in ISD in Texas. So come on over, friends, join me. Hello, hello, and welcome. All right, so we are ready to get started. So I thought a perfect place to start is myths versus facts. That's what we're talking about here. So Amy, I know Lightspeed's done some work on this recently, and I wanted to kick off and sort of, frame the conversation around what you found at Lightspeed. And if you could talk us through this slide a little bit to kick us off.
Definitely. Thank you, Christine. At Lightspeed, we're sort of constantly talking to district leaders like all of you, and increasingly screen time is coming up in those conversations. If you think about it, it makes sense. Screen time is tied to mental health, to student engagement, to educational outcomes, school budgets, even topics like AI. Really, all the hot topics that are going on in ed tech, screen time relates to them. And I think that one of the things that happens is that parents assume that their kids are just sitting glued to their devices all day. Then you see things happening in school board meetings where they want to limit or restrict the use of those devices. But the data tells a somewhat different story. So we're going to kick off this really important conversation with some of that data. So from hundreds of districts around the country using Lightspeed Insight, our product, we looked at real activity on district-owned devices. If you look across K-12, students spend an average of 77 minutes of screen time per day on those district devices. That's less than 20% of the average school day, and I think far less than what a lot of people assume. Most of that time, you can see on the left chart, happens in school, supporting instruction, not after school. And as you might expect, screen time averages really vary by grade or age. Elementary students average under an hour per day, while once you get into middle and high schoolers, they're spending a bit more time online as their coursework and collaboration and other sorts of activity increase. Now, another interesting trend comes up when you look at the seasonality of screen time. So here we're looking at those average minutes per day, but over time. Screen time tapers across the school year following the rhythm of instruction. There's testing season and holidays and end of year projects, but usage generally stays below 90 minutes a day. And even at its highest, when it's peaking there in February, it's less than 100 minutes. That consistency shows how digital learning has matured in the time I know we all have been thinking about these things, and many of our attendees here. Technology isn't replacing instruction, it's becoming integrated into it and supplemental to it. And that's a key point that we share with districts when we're having those conversations, and that I think you all can use in your conversations too. When used effectively, a device is just a natural ebb and flow along with teaching. It's not entertainment or distraction, it's a part of that learning process. So if you all are thinking about guidelines, screen time guidelines, that seasonality is another important consideration for you to work into those plans. Now, here is where it really gets interesting. When we look at those minutes and where those minutes go, the conversation shifts from quantity to quality because not all screen time is created equal. And I think that's a really important message to get across. There's no magic number of the right minutes of screen time for someone to have. So when we look at those 77 minutes on average, it's clear that on their district devices, students are spending the majority of that time in curriculum platforms, on productivity tools, and in academic apps. That's iReady or Google Docs or Canvas, tools that they use for learning, not just doom scrolling. So I think the takeaway here is really that it's not that students are on schools too much, it's that or on screens too much. It's that when we're thinking about what students are doing on the screens, we need to think about the purpose behind it. Are they creating, researching, collaborating, and building fluency? Other tools, content filtering and classroom management, can really help create those digital guardrails to ensure that students are staying focused on the apps and the tools that we want them to. So with the Lightspeed platform, this is the sort of data that Insight is surfacing to guide conversations around things like screen time. And Charles and Kyle have a lot to share about how we take it from data to how it really plays out in a district. And I'm excited to move into that portion of the conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. That's fascinating. So yes, let's turn to our district leaders. I want to ask this next question, I think, in two parts. First part being, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about screen time usage? And secondly, how are you educating your community about those misconceptions, your parents, your school boards, your policymakers? Kyle, let's start with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So Kyle Berger, Chief Technology Officer in Grapevine-Colleyville ISD, located here in North Texas. See several Texas folks in the chat there. So there is always this great misconception that we battle with screen time. Here in Grapevine-Colleyville, we've been a one-to-one district for over 13 years with every student in every grade level carrying a device. And the assumption is that the kid is looking at that device from 8 in the morning till 4 o'clock, that it's constantly in their face. No other teaching is happening. And in that regard, is something that we constantly have to battle in educating our community with and our parents. Our data really matches pretty close to what Amy was sharing. And I think a lot of y'all, as you reflect and spend time walking to your schools and looking, you would probably agree that there's probably a very, very small amount of students that are glued on a screen 8 hours a day. It's just not happening. So that misconception is really big. And then breaking it down, like Amy described, on the type of screen time. There is different types of screen time that we need to talk about. just actively watching a video, being active, collaborative, and those kind of things. So we really break that conversation down. For us, how we do that is we have professional development with our teachers to really talk around our expectations of what amount of time our students will be on a device overall. But then we have a lot of community education through our Parent Tech Academy, where we have monthly meetings that just talk about all sorts of things technology. And one focus each year on one of those meetings is around screen time and technology uses for students. And that's where we really describe how our intended focus is on that and what you can also do to help with screen time. We go as far as to encourage our parents to participate, and we do a device-free dinner once a year. That we invite people out to a local restaurant, and we lock up their cell phones and say, "Hey, if you can make it through dinner without looking at a device in general, our partners will help sponsor your dinner for you." So we're trying to educate that just because we're technology people, we are not peddling and pushing screens. We want the balance of that technology overall. So that's kind of where we kind of see it and what we've been battling with. I don't know, Charles, what are you dealing with?
Yeah, we have the same type of misconceptions where parents and the community feel like the students are on their screens constantly. And I do think that some of the misconception comes from when students get home, right? What boundaries are being set so that we're not necessarily mirroring the exact environment that you may or may not have at home. And so being able to communicate to to our parents and to our community that, hey, here are our boundaries, and really also communicating through our students, right? And so the students being able to explain exactly what they worked on, and the content and the curriculum being readily available so that our parents know exactly what their students are working on. But I totally agree. We've only been a one-to-one program since the pandemic, so now about 3 or 4 years. And because of that, right, we're kind of going through some of those community education experiences currently. I know a lot of districts are in that same boat where we had a small one-to-one program, but now we're one-to-one take-home pre-K through 12. And a lot of it is explaining to parents exactly what students have access to, showing them exactly what our approved applications are, explaining exactly what screen time looks like for every grade level, also engaging our CTE and those departments to also explain exactly what boundaries we have and what opportunities we have, because it does work both ways, right? Screen time allows for a very rich environment for learning, right? A lot of customized learning, a lot of project-based learning, et cetera. So you can do a lot on the screen, but it's not the only area where students are engaged. And so really being able to get parents engaged, that's the first thing, right? Because like you see a lot about parent choice, and I'm sure we'll talk about that throughout this presentation. But because there's parent choice, right, like that parent engagement is also very, very important.
I'd like to add, Charles, the parent partnership is key for everything. And I'd be remiss to mention, we use Lightspeed as our filtering content agent here, and its parent portal piece has played a tremendous part in that, because we can also leverage, our parents have the ability where they can block and turn off internet access on that district device. Because we all know as a parent, you might put that device away at night and that kid's going to get up in the middle of the night and still try to do something. Maybe that's just at my house, but we're empowering our parents to be a part of that process in ways that they can help with that too. So really extending that conversation to where it's not just about in the classroom, it's just life in general, how we can do that best practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Kyle, because that's something I'm hearing, just partnering with your communities. Like, it's not us versus them. It's like we all have the same end goal here to support our students. So I love that. And I know that in Texas, Kyle and Charles, you're dealing with another layer. They just had House Bill 1481, which is a cell phone ban. In our rehearsal, I understand there's something else. So maybe, I don't know, Charles, if you want to start. So how has that impacted teaching and learning since that ban went into place, if you're comfortable sharing?
Absolutely. We've heard nothing but amazing things from all of our teachers, all of our principals. It comes up quite a bit in our district leadership training. We already had policies in place, like many districts. So we were already saying, like, we cannot have students walking through hallways with earbuds on. We cannot have students, on their phones during class, et cetera. So but being able to have teeth around that policy, being able to clearly and uniformly say we're all going to enforce this, that is really what I think the bill enabled us to do. And so now we see that is being enforced, with fidelity. And we also have seen just more. From what I've heard is a lot more of our students are talking to each other. You see a lot more engagement in class activities. So I think it's been very, very, very positive.
Okay, interesting.
I would agree. I mean, it has definitely helped us here. We had policies in place. It kind of helped us to be able to enforce that from a lens saying, hey, it's not just us making this, it's a statewide. But it really made a shift for a lot of our students as well, because probably like a majority of y'all on this call, chances are a majority of y'all looked at the screen of your phone before your feet touched the earth this morning. It's just a natural addiction that everybody seems to have. And so we've seen kids go through some sense of withdrawal. I don't know if you've seen it, Charles, seeing that withdrawal factor. But what it's also done is have students trying to get a little more creative on their district devices to find ways to try to communicate. And that's where having a robust system to be able to monitor that is very helpful, because our kids have really tried to find other means to communicate throughout the day or do this stuff. But it has helped too for us to navigate that conversation with parents, because again, now, this screen time addiction your kids have, it's really to their phone. It's not to their instructional device, is more on your hands now, because they're not stuck on this cell phone at school. They're really focused on instruction, and we can control what's on that screen. You're really going to have to watch that other side of the equation, because we've seen that happen, and where parents say, well, now my kids, even more on their phone. How do we even think that was possible when they're not at school? Because they feel like they're just so disconnected. But we've seen great impacts in our classes with, less interruptions and less engagement. The first month I would say was rough for the students, but here we are, heading into November, and it seems just normal now, to be honest, that we're back to that. So I'm very surprised and pleased with how that's turned out.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I'll piggyback for a little bit. For the first month, it was rough for the students. I think it was also pretty anxious and anxiety inducing for parents, because parents are so used to having that connectivity to students. So we have a tip line, and where all of our parent concerns, either they go through the principal, but if they wanted to go to central administration, they go through the tip line. And we got a lot of concerns about, school violence and our capability to be able to contact their students if there's ever a concern. And so what that really forced us to do was to reach out to our parents and re-explain some of the policies and processes and best practices we have around student safety. So that was actually a good opportunity for us to kind of re-educate around, here's exactly what should have been happening, even though some of those things might have been circumvented because you had easier access to your student via cell phone.
We heard really similar things from all of our customers who pretty quickly, the cell phone bans, not just in Texas, but the many other states that have them, were seen as so positive that it's almost one of the things that drove us to pulling this data together, because we were hearing from parent groups and school board groups, cell phone bans are so great. Let's just cut back the use of those district devices too. Let's turn down the technology altogether. And that's a little bit where this idea of let's frame it in the data of what does that use really look like came from. And stealing a little bit from the Q&A at the end, there are questions about that data. That data is the district devices. So we're not looking at students' personal cell phones. We're not looking at those other devices, which obviously is the focus of this conversation here. But there's a lot of interplay between a personal device and what restrictions on that mean, and what a district device, the impacts can be. As Kyle points out, sometimes you need to tighten up your filtering policies around communication tools or other things, because now, as he says, kids are going to turn to that during the day to try to do what they were doing with their cell phone.
That's interesting. Yeah. And so how can school districts determine, I'm going to kind of get into like the practical kind of nuts and bolts, because we always like to have folks walk away with some takeaways. So how can a school district determine if their instructional screen time is being utilized effectively? And Kyle, if you want to take that first.
Yeah, it's one of like the holy grail, that we're all trying to, the power of, ed tech tools, effectiveness and screen time effectiveness. I think what for us, so we have digital insights from Lightspeed that really helps us get that lens into the usage, but it really is also trying to define through what screen time is. And really, we've always talked about screen time as, this passive and active screen time, but it really, this other phase of it has come up recently for us over the past year or so of what is in a sense of required screen time, because here in Texas, our state tests and assessments are all on the computer and different things. So there's this amount of required screen time that we have, and then the other type of screen time. So when we're framing conversations with parents, because it is and can be a very difficult question. If anybody on here had a parent come up and say, what is the amount of time you require my third grader to be on a device, and what is the average time? That's a hard question, to figure out how you're going to peel that back. And so by using Lightspeed Digital Insights, we have that lens into there to where we can see it, of course, down to the application level, but we can start kind of seeing active time and so forth to combine those numbers. And then from there, what we do is try to see any kind of correlations. Can we correlate that to any kind of the academic results that we're seeing? How does it compare by demographic? How does it compare by campus to campus? To kind of see, is anything popping out that we need to be aware of and kind of hone into a little bit more. It's not a perfect science yet. I don't think anybody can say, hey, 30 minutes is the magic number or 40 is the magic number. And that's going to be different for everybody. But I think we're getting close to trying to figure out where is a good effective rate of amount of screen time and when does it become detrimental to instruction. So that's kind of the adventure that we're on. And I feel we get closer and closer each year with it. And I'm excited with some potential new things coming that will get even closer by the end of this school year.
And I love that. And it's also so personalized too. I would think, how do you throw personalized learning in the mix here?
Right.
Really. Charles, I don't know if you have anything to add. I know you're mostly on the tech side of things, but just sort of, determining instructional screen time usage in the district.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I am not over the instructional technology team. So I work really, really closely with our curriculum and instruction teams and folks. So that they're, we are allowing them some of the tools and features in order to get reports and look into the data and answer questions that we get, whether it be from our parents, from our board, from our community as a whole. We also use Lightspeed Digital Insight to hone in on some of that data, and especially from the application level. I'm super excited about screen time, Lightspeed screen time, to see exactly what that looks like. I have a demo in a couple of days, actually. So I think that we get a lot of questions about it. We get a lot of questions because we're shifting now into, and I won't get on the soapbox, but we are competing for students as a whole, right? And so having data that shows here's where we are on average, or here's where we expect to be, or being able to, because we already communicate exactly what our curriculum and instruction teams say. Here's the guidance to the teacher. Here's what we expect for different grade levels, but being able to back that up with data and being able to show that, it will be huge, right? And it will help us refute any kind of misconceptions or misunderstandings that may be out there. We got a request from one of our board members, right? Just really concerned and really wanting to underscore and understand exactly what our screen time reality is. And so that was really one of the things that I brought to Lightspeed to say, hey, we've checked our firewalls, we've checked all of our other tools. Is there any way we can get students online between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m. and trying to hone down, right? And it's 114,000 students, right? Trying to get that across the entire district is hard. And so I think we will all be asked as district leaders, as tech leaders, we're going to all be asked to provide more data and more insight into what our students are doing on our district provided devices.
Yeah, I think too, what the advantage also of that cell phone ban that's helping us and helping this data be a little bit more actionable for us is taking out the competitive screen time. We were competing with screen time between the cell phone and the district device. So it was always the debate. I can't really tell you the true screen time because they have their own device, they have all this other stuff. Now that we've been able to limit that personal screen time out and can focus in on the device level, we can really start getting more actionable data to work from. because we can tell you that this is what it is. I don't know, because prior, they might have been doing stuff on their phone, researching on their phone, or doing other things. Now we can have that more defined to truly see measurable data and have those real discussions from the instructional lens, but also with parents as well.
We probably all also recognize from our own lives how distracting having two devices can be, that even that district device time probably wasn't as beneficial, wasn't as like deep into learning. So you get benefits out of it from so many ways, having a student focus on a district device that's protected and that's measured and that's made for those learning opportunities.
And I want to also kind of throw out another thing we're hearing, which is equity. So I'm curious to hear from our panelists how equity factors in when screen time is restricted or banned. And I don't know who takes that. I don't know, Carl, Charles, you want to take that first?
Sure, I'll jump in. I'm sure Kyle will jump in as well.
Okay.
It's just extremely important, right? And that's the reason why we try to focus, and every one of our students will get the same exact tech stack, right? They'll get the same exact curriculum opportunities, period. But speaking directly around technology, we purposefully went pre-K through 12 1-to-1. One, because it was predicated from the pandemic, but then it allowed us to innovate, right? It allowed us to shift some of the thoughts around, we're more traditional learning experiences to more digital learning experiences, or a mixture, right? The combination of both. And so really, we purposefully, intentionally gave access to every one of our students. That was one thing from an equity lens that we thought was very important. And we do it in general, so we don't, as a district, and this might change at any given time, but we don't focus as much on targeted experience at campuses. So we don't do magnet campuses and so forth, because we really try to ensure that we have the best experience for all. Understanding that some students did not have access to internet or connectivity access at home, we also provided wireless hotspots, and we continue to do that as necessary. We also work with our library systems to kind of help promote some of their programs that really focus on digital learning and internet access. So it is a continuous item. It's a continuous piece. It also gets helped out, I think, by ensuring that while you are at school, you have the same level of access. We have a device at home, but we can't really ensure that the student may have a cell phone or may have a cell phone with connectivity or connection. So being able to provide those access to technology helps out tremendously.
Great. Kyle, what are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely the same. For being 1-to-1 for so long here, it was a big push that all of our kids had the equal access. And just as Charles mentioned, we've been issuing hotspots out prior to the pandemic, because realizing that all the kids didn't have access to a home computer or to a cell phone or to bring your own device, any of those nature. And then again, with the cell phone ban kind of coming in and different things, we wanted to make sure still this general access was there. And it's not just at school for us. That's why we really, our 1-to-1 is the take home, 24/7, 365 to have these devices. And it really offers a lens into that equity in different areas as well. We use Lightspeed's Signal product, which can give us insight on how that product is, or that laptop is performing at home. So we can see, wow, these students, yeah, they have internet, but it is really poor internet connectivity. They're not able to really get the content they need. We need to try to address that. And so we can find equity within our issues within our community on just connectivity in general. And then we can address that as well to make sure they're getting the access they need. So that's what helps too with insight in that, to really break down that screen time, but what's happening within our instructional hour and what's happening outside of our instructional hour. And then trying to see what controls we can put in place to control that ourselves. But it's eye-opening, the time that you'll see kids on devices at all hours of the day. Some of them at different ages and stuff, and how we can analyze and really try to put some guidelines in to help that. But I think overall, equity is leveled out for us. We don't see it too much of an issue since we've been pretty standardized for all, but I think it's a very important thing to keep in mind, especially with more of these bans and limited technology or the cost of technology in general, that we ensure that every child has access to the same amount of technology and the same resources in this ever-changing world that we're in. And if you can get it to them at home, try to do that as well. If you're not there already, I think is critically important.
Yeah, Amy, what are you hearing in this?
Yeah, you brought up so many great points there, Charles and Kyle, both. I think that sometimes restrictions can actually create more equal usage, like in a cell phone ban. But sometimes restrictions can widen gaps. So if you were to think about, we're not seeing this, but if you were to think about putting a screen time limit on district devices, the reality is that for some students, that is the only device, right? The district provided device is the only access to a ton of curriculum and content and learning that they have. The same as time at school is their only access to great connectivity to be able to do that. So if you restrict that too far, you're widening gaps with students who have many other devices and connectivity points to turn to. So it's just something to keep in mind when creating policies and creating restrictions. It, in a lot of ways, parallels some of the conversations happening today around AI. If you totally block AI, then students who have a personal device still have access to AI, and students who don't have a personal device don't. It's similar to the screen time debate. You have to find ways to make it safe, to make sure it's protected, and to keep it healthy, whether that's teaching students and staff and parents how to have, better digital citizenship or self-control to kind of learn to regulate their own screen time over time, right? Because they're going to get to a point where no one is monitoring their screen time use and helping make sure that they're doing a good job of regulating that. They have to learn those skills along the way.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important that parent communication piece and just really talking and educating our parents. I mean, listen, I age myself a little bit, but probably a lot of y'all here growing up, we were all told, right, don't talk to strangers. We were all told don't get in cars with strangers. Everybody on this call has an app on your phone where you press a button and call a car and get in a car with a stranger, right? It's a different world that we're living in society nowadays. And we have to educate our parents who don't maybe realize that in those communities. We're engaged, we're involved and connected, but not all of our parents are and understand the dynamics of technology today. So it's just an important factor for us to not just control and monitor our school, but carry that conversation over and to help parents understand the world in which their kids live and develop it.
Yeah. So, and final question before we move to our audience Q&A here. It's a lot. I know our readers are overwhelmed. We were even talking before this call, what's the policy? Who owns the actions and to ensure that it's happening. So I wanted to kind of go around and just say, any advice, not that you've got it all figured out, but any advice that you'd offer to districts who are really kind of in the middle of this and maybe just feeling a little overwhelmed as to even where to get started. So maybe Kyle, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so before we had tools like Insight and stuff, there was a lot of, say, boots in the ground or just surveying and just getting some eyes out there to kind of see what is that usage looking like. How when we walk into class, how many kids are actually on the device, and then talking a lot with our students and our teachers on to try to gauge what that usage is, and now being able to see the data on the back end to kind of marry that together. So you can step into this, but I think having that conversation from the CNI lens, talk with curriculum and instruction and talk about, okay, what is our required time a student needs to be on a device? And then what do we want to build out with the usage of that device? What is our expectation? Hopefully you don't have somebody in CNI says, I hope it's 8 hours a day on the screen, well, we got to think different. All right. So having that discussion to say, what is our expectation up here? And then let's see from a teacher's perspective, what do they feel? What's appropriate? And then kind of finding that within your community as well, because every community is different. Every campus is different on the expectations, especially coming out of COVID and the pandemic, the expectation of screen time. Everybody thinks that they're living on these things. And so how can we break that misnomer out there? And that's what I think is the biggest thing to do, is just start the discussion and try to figure out and establish what's right for your campus or your district, and what is y'all's expectation, and then how can we build towards that.
And just ask a follow-up question there. So how do you start the conversation? Is it a survey? Is it,
So our first level was a simple survey. We sent out a simple Google survey with just some basic stuff to just gather. And then we did our walk arounds, boots on the ground, to kind of see how things were matching up, to see, you'd always hear, or you might have a parent say, my kid's always on the device all day. Okay, well, let's just go over there, curiosity, and see what that campus is doing. Or they're all playing games. Well, they're not really, they're in iReady or something else. It might have a game aspect to it, but the kid thinks he's playing a game. So having those conversations, and then surveying our community as well, surveying our parents and stuff, just saying, hey, what do you think is the appropriate average screen time? What do you think it is for an elementary, a middle, and a high school? And then what do you think it is for yourself? To kind of see, do they see themselves different as their kids? Do they see, and so that we can have that kind of conversation back and forth. So just trying to gather that information point to see where we're going.
Yeah, that's helpful. Charles, what advice might you offer to some districts?
Yeah, Kyle covered a lot for sure. I think to a couple of Kyle's points, right? Communication and partnership. So we talked about partnering with parents to see what the parent expectations are. Typically, the squeaky wheel will get the oil. And so some of those parents might be very vocal, which is great because it kind of helps keep us on our game. That's my positive way of looking at it. But it's also the sense of, can we get their information, right? Can we get what their expectations are? Is that a survey? And then how do we communicate that survey? How are we effectively, so if that survey asks the question of, what do you think, or have you been told by your teacher? Have you been told by your campus what the screen time expectations are? And if they haven't, then maybe we need to do a more effective job of communication. So I do think a lot of it is partnership. It's understanding what the reality is, bringing the reality in front of the community, making sure that reality of what's happening in the classroom aligns with the expectation of the general community.
Thank you. And Amy, you work with districts all over the country, rural, large, urban, I'm curious, if you have any tips on kind of where to get started. I mean, obviously it's going to vary, but just maybe some basic foundational beginnings.
Yeah, I would say kind of start with exactly what we're doing here. Start with some data, some information, whether you're getting that from surveys or from software or from wherever it is. Start with data and use it to open up a conversation. Does this seem right to you? Are you surprised about this? Does this seem like an ideal state? What does an ideal state look like? How does that change for younger students, older students, a rural environment, a suburban environment, whatever it is? I think, key to this is not going in with preconceived notions or ideal answers. It's opening up a conversation, because every community is going to be different. Every student or grade or school within a district is going to be different. So it's just being probably more transparent and open to having these great dialogues like Kyle and Charles are obviously having in their districts.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. So we're time for questions. And I know we've got a bunch here, and I know some of them are very specific, so I'm sure our panelists can answer them. One overarching question I have is, we're talking a lot about Lightspeed Insight, and the data looks amazing, but I don't know, Amy, can you take us under the hood a little bit and just, how does it work?
Yeah, great question, Christine. So Lightspeed Insight is an EdTech analytics platform designed to give districts visibility into a lot of different things. How apps are being used, where there are security and compliance gaps, how all of this technology is coming together to improve educational outcomes, where they can save money, all kinds of things, including this activity that rolls up to screen time. So it works with agents that are installed on devices and with extensions that are installed on browsers to really track activity on these district devices. The agents and the extensions are tracking how much time is spent on apps, what apps are used, what different students and grades and classes and campuses across the district are doing, as well as things like license costs and where there are opportunities to reduce spend. So it's really based on those proprietary smart agents and our technology that is monitoring what is going on those district devices.
So the reduced spend is another sort of perk, right? So what's actually being used, what's not being used, is that
exactly, because it all comes down to data, right? If you're tracking what is being used, you're not relying on surveys that say, are you using this curriculum app that we invested a lot of money in? You're tracking if that is being used, and you can have conversations like, we bought 10,000 licenses and we're using 5,000. Should we cut 5,000 or should we do professional development? Like, there's not an answer in the data, but there's a conversation in that data.
I think also with that too, as Amy showed on one of the early slides around how screen time, has that phase of time throughout the year. You see that same approach with different types of software. So you can see the peaks and valleys of certain type of software usage. Are we heavy on this type of software usage pre-state assessment? And then afterwards, we're not touching it for 4 months. And then all of a sudden you're turning it back on. So it really allows you to have a lens into actual software usage. Or in the past, years ago, we just get a usage report from the company we bought the software from saying, hey, everybody's logging in. It's great. Time to renew. Well, now we can actually look at it and put a different lens on what actual usage is happening, what actual time in, not just logging in. Are they actually doing something inside actively? So that's an important lens that Digital Insights really gives us a view into.
Yeah, that's a whole other webinar.
There was some disbelief in the comments about the 13% of time on games. I think I have that fact right. And you bring up an interesting point, Kyle. I wonder if this is obviously an average over many months. Would that go higher in May or towards the end of the school year?
Does,
How do those things fluctuate, right?
Yeah, we totally see that. And the reason that's probably low is, a lot of us have filters like Lightspeed that block access to games. So the data is off of district devices. So it's definitely not saying the kid's cell phone and everything else. So you are getting blocked and restricted to go into those gaming sites and so forth. But it definitely has its peaks and valleys. I'll say, good or not, after state testing is here, our usage of games and other video instruction might increase. So.
Excellent. I did have a question here. Someone who wanted to hear more, going back to that parent partnership we talked about earlier about the Parent Tech Academy that was mentioned. So maybe for someone interested in starting something like that, I want to share a bit more.
Absolutely. So, parent engagement, student engagement is a critical factor for me. When I came here 9 years ago, establishing the Parent Tech Academy, it was means to get out to our community and really just start bridging that partnership. A lot of us here in Texas and otherwise, we have to live off of bond elections, and we have to go to the community and say, hey, we're going to need you to support this bond election. And a big thing for me was I didn't want the community to the first time seeing me out there pitching to give me money, to do a bond and do this stuff. I wanted to be able to have just open conversations. So we have monthly Parent Tech Academy meetings, and those go out at least 3 of them a year are focused on directly school related stuff. And the others is general technology. So the first one of the year is, open up to parents to talk about how to get into, make sure you're seeing your students' grades, set up parent notifications. What questions do you have about the apps we're using? And then we have a session that is about screen time in general. Let's talk about technology addiction. Let's talk about what you need to see. The most popular session is one that we have about the apps on students' phones. Let's talk about all these apps the kids have on their phones and what they're doing with these and what you need to know about the threats and dangers with that. We partner with local law enforcement and others to do that. And that's open to everybody in our community to come talk about, just so we can make sure that our community is technology aware of society and what's happening. You can do it in different ways. You can partner with your PTA and have it based off of PTA meetings. And this is an open forum here that's become normal for us to have parents engage in that conversation. And it could be scary at first, but you'll see that, we're all trying to really want to do the same thing together. And it's like Amy said, we can put the stats up here. Here's what our numbers are. What do y'all think? Let's tear it apart, ask the questions, because we're trying to figure it out too. We want to figure it out together. So if you're not doing a Parent Tech Academy, I suggest you kind of look at something to get out there and just have that conversation in general, especially now with AI. I mean, folks, the conversation about AI is just going crazy, right? And if you're not having that conversation in your community as well, to have them understand what you're doing as a school system, but what they need to be aware of, because we can block and control and educate, but when they leave our schools, we need your help to also understand what's going on and better educate yourself. So it's very important to kind of build into that. So I hope that kind of helps a little bit in the context of what we do around parent tech.
And so we've talked about parents a lot, but we also have school boards and policymakers. I don't know if anyone wants to touch that one, but would anyone like to offer some advice about how, Kyle was talking about his board meeting yesterday. I think going back to the data, maybe you can talk about how that can be helpful when you're dealing it with school boards, policymakers, et cetera. And you want to, Charles or
yeah,
Kyle?
I'll start on that, Christine, because you and I have talked about it so much with other Lightspeed districts as well. We have seen many customers take just that data to their school boards to have exactly that conversation. And even as everyone was talking here, something occurred to me that had not occurred to me before, which is that parents see their kids on their personal devices all evening long, and their latest vision of what a classroom looks like, their latest clear, seen it with their own eyes vision is during COVID, is when a student was sitting there on their device all day long, right? So once again, go into that school board with that data and trying to have a conversation to reframe what has become, I think, an emotional and fraught topic, kind of bring it down to let's have a conversation about what's really going on and what should be going on. And Kyle said it really great a minute ago, like we're all in it together, right? Trying to do the right thing for the kids and need to work together to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that. I think I brought up the board members' request earlier. A lot of it comes, and I think for us, one of the opportunities that we have at CFISD is, how do we get from people pulling the information from us, right? Making those requests versus that more proactive push of information. And I think the more we start to kind of, analyze the data and be able to provide dashboards and be able to provide analytics, I think I can see a future where parents are just getting the information from their parent portal, where they can go in and see exactly what the screen time is, see exactly what their students are accessing, block whatever they want blocked from home. And so I think we are transitioning from the classroom to the living room, right, for example, or to the home. So that's going to be interesting. But I would say for us, an opportunity would be to be more proactive with pushing the data. Sometimes you really want to be able to generate some interest. So you want your board and your leaders to be interested in the data. Or if you send it over, they won't read it per se, but it's that balance, right? And I do expect that probably within the next couple of years, we're going to start seeing more and more requests for that data to be sent to our community and to our parents.
One of the things that we have talked with a lot of customers about, including at our district advisory council, this came up, is that just sending the data creates a lot of questions, as it did in the Q&A here. What is this? This can't be right. How do you measure screen time? What is screen time? Like all of those that I think getting the data into people's hands and then being able to, whether it's, a conversation online or a conversation in person, whatever it is, being able to explain what it means, talk through it, all of those things is really important too, because you parents don't understand how screen time is measured, but like what that really looks like. The same as they're probably thinking about it a little bit differently in terms of the curriculum is online, the testing is online, screen time jumps at this time of the year because of X, Y, and Z that's happening in the district. So just being able to communicate those things, I think, goes a long way.
I love it. All right, we are almost out of time. Any last words of advice? Maybe one piece of advice from each of you. What's been one of the most, important things that you've learned in your educating of screen time? I think I can already answer for some of you, but Kyle.
Well, I think it's, it's truly having that understanding of the different types of screen time. But the thing that we always really emphasize, and I saw some questions on this too, is that technology, a fancy application, the screen will never replace a true instructor and a teacher in the classroom. And we are not making sole decisions on, how many hours a day or minutes they're on a screen based on your academic results. There's a much bigger picture, but this gives us a great lens into understanding our usage, the investment that is being made, and how that is being used appropriately. And it will never replace, and that's what we stress with our community and our teachers, never going to replace our teachers, and having great instructional leaders in there and encouraging beyond screen discussions. Let's put the screen down, let's collaborate, let's talk as a whole group overall, and getting engaged in those conversations with our parents and even our kids. They're wanting it as well too. They don't want to be stuck on a screen all the time. They want to be able to just sit and talk. Is having that moment and doing that. So I encourage everyone to go out, talk with your parents, talk with the kids, see what numbers are out there, and just have the conversation start. And so we can build up to what's appropriate for y'all and your community and your schools overall. That's
great. Charles?
I am very excited for the future. I think that we're kind of coming to like a pinnacle of interoperability between so many tools. And when I say that, I mean, we have classroom management, and we have our content filtering, and we have our filter, and we have our data analytics and reporting, and our digital insights, et cetera. So I envision this combination of items. And then I think once we can look at what we currently provide, like what we currently provide to our teachers and our principals and to our district leaders and eventually to our parents, I think then from a accountability standpoint, how do we then take some of that same data and look at what are the results, right? And so I think we might shift the conversation and really focus on, yes, it is that teacher who is driving those results, but we could also kind of look at where technology is improving the experience for our students and getting them more prepared for the future. So I think really having, that intersection between the data, both from accountability and from performance, married to what are the students doing on a regular basis in the classroom, I think that's going to create a powerful and rich experience, a rich data set for everyone to understand how we can be better educators.
Excellent. Amy?
Yeah, I would say start with visibility. Like, you can't manage what you don't measure. So you need to have some sort of sense of what is going on. And tied to that, but also kind of a cheap second point, is don't forget professional development. Kyle and Charles have talked about this many times. Like, we're talking about devices that are in classrooms with teachers, and we need to continuously be working with teachers and the instructional and curriculum side to figure out what that balance looks like and how that balance changes and what's working and what's not working.
Excellent. Thank you to my speakers. This has been wonderful. I will let you off for the day to go about your, thank you for all your good work. Thank you for everything you shared. And we're just going to close now to just say, remind everybody to go to that docs tab, because Lightspeed has put some really, really helpful information in there. If you don't yet subscribe to Tech and Learning, please do. We've got a link there to subscribe. And I also wanted to announce the winner of our Amazon gift card. So drum roll, please. We have the winner is Samantha Belcourt of New Hampshire. Thank you for joining us. And first of all, a little bit of homework. I want us all to go and host a device-free dinner, because I wrote that down, and I'm going to try and see if I can actually have my friends get through that. We'll see how that goes. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.